When you think about the most famous wedding dresses, chances are very high that you are thinking of Jackie Kennedy's wedding gown. It's been analyzed, exhibited, it's been featured in magazines. But here's my question. Do you actually know who designed it? Because for decades, the designer behind it was rarely mentioned, despite being one of the most talented couturiers of her time. Her name was Anne Lowe, a black designer who at the time dressed the American elite, yet at the same time her legacy was almost forgotten. And before I dive into the details, this is a non-sponsored video, I'm just sharing my personal opinion and my research here. Everything I say is alleged and for entertainment purposes only. The wedding of Jackie Kennedy and John F. Kennedy was more than just a wedding, it was a political spectacle, and we could say it was a puzzle piece in a bigger plan, because John F. Kennedy's father, Joseph Kennedy, had big plans for his son. Of course, he wanted him to become the president of the United States, and the wedding was part of the road to this success. There were 600 diplomats, senators, and people from the upper social strata. 2,000 spectators waited in front of the church, and 900 people were invited to the reception. Needless to say, there was also a lot of press that later then reported about the wedding. Nothing was left to chance, and that included the wedding dress. And Joseph Kennedy, yes, the father-in-law, had very particular ideas about the wedding dress, because he wanted to create a myth of kind of an American royalty, and the dress should help create this. He opted for Anne Lowe, who at the time dressed the American elite, and she should bring this vision of the American royalty to life. Ironically, Jackie Kennedy later said in interviews that she would have actually preferred a French designer. We will also see that it was not really her style, because when you look into her style evolution, you will see that she was leaning more to simpler silhouettes and style, but ultimately it was not her choice, because Joseph Kennedy wanted to also involve symbolism here, because it should be an American designer for the future First Lady of the United States. Anne Lowe dressed the American elite, but her own background couldn't have been more different from her clientele. She was born in 1898 in Clayton, Alabama, and her grandmother was enslaved, later emancipated, and she and Anne Lowe's mother were seamstresses. Together, the three women, so the grandmother, the mother, and the granddaughter, founded a business. But after the sudden death of her mother, Anne Lowe then took over the business. At the time, she was only 16 years old. Her talent would bring her to Florida after a chance encounter with a socialite from there. She ended up working for that lady, and then she also enrolled in a couture sewing program in New York. And there's quite an interesting story, because she applied, and obviously the school had not been able to tell that she was black from the application. And when she showed up in New York, they realized that she was black and segregated her from her classmates. Nevertheless, Anne Lowe did not give up. She finished this couture sewing course. Then she returned to Florida, where she would spend another decade working, and then she moved back to New York. She would not immediately open her own boutique or studio. She worked for fashion houses like Saks Fifth Avenue or Hattie Carnegie, so it was not under her own label. And also Olivia de Havilland wore one of her designs to the Academy Awards. Nevertheless, the label inside did not mention Anne Lowe's name. It mentioned the name of the company that basically commissioned Anne Lowe. It was Sonia Gowns Inc. In 1950, she opened her own store on Madison Avenue, and she soon became, let's say, the best kept secret of New York's elite, because she was known for her quality, her beautiful couture designs, yet the prices were relatively affordable. And she was famously quite selective about her clients, because in Ebony magazine she once mentioned, "I'm not interested in sewing for Cafe Society or social climbers. I sew for the families of the social register." So Anne Lowe was already popular among the American elites, but when she was asked to design Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress, that was a huge deal. She had already been working with the family before, so they were not strangers. She had designed the wedding dress for Jackie Kennedy's mother's second wedding. And then she was asked by the family to design not only Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress, but also the dress for her mother and also the bridesmaids. So I think in total it was like 15 dresses, and it took her and her team 2 months to create all of these dresses. But then disaster struck, because a pipe broke in the studio, flooded it, everything was completely dirty, destroyed. And Anne Lowe did something that was actually quite unusual. She did not inform her clients. She just fixed the situation, repurchased the fabric, and she and her team made all of these dresses that initially took them 2 months to make within 8 days, just to get it right for the wedding. So this shows us not only how important this was to her, but also her commitment, her resilience. She then personally drove from New York City to Rhode Island to deliver the dresses in person, and then she was asked to use the back door to enter the house. She straight up refused and said, either I enter like everybody else or you're not getting the dresses. The dress itself was breathtaking. It involved 50 yards of silk taffeta, that's about 46 meters, and it was clearly inspired by Dior's new look, which he created in 1947, because we see the narrow waistline and the big skirt. We are now in 1953, and she also used a technique called trapunto. You can see these concentric circles and the ruffles, and they kind of create a very structured effect for the dress. Despite the fact that this dress basically made headlines around the world, people were freaking out about it, so many people loved it, Anne Lowe herself actually was never mentioned in these articles. And if you want to know what Jackie Kennedy actually said herself, or is said to have said herself about the designer, you need to go to my website. I'm not going to say this here due to the YouTube algorithm, but let's just make it brief. It was not very positive what she said. And then a lot of the journalists, or most of the journalists, actually decided not to mention Anne Lowe's name. Only one reporter, Nina Hyde of the Washington Post, tracked down Anne Lowe and published her name. So I would understand that she's not only disappointed, I would understand that she is upset or maybe have some feelings of animosity against the Kennedys, but this is another side of the designer. She never seemed to have a feeling of animosity against the family. According to her biographer, Julia Fay Smith, she did contact Jackie Kennedy or her office or secretary, and they are said to have come back to her within days with kind of an apology. They also said that the White House requested a retraction, but it was never printed. Despite all of this, Anne Lowe never publicly spoke badly about the Kennedy family or how this whole thing went. And there's also a silent footnote to the story. Much later, Anne Lowe ran into troubles with her business, financial issues and also issues with the IRS. Suddenly her debt was cleared by an anonymous benefactor, and also the issues with the IRS basically evaporated, and it is assumed, also she assumed, that it was actually Jackie Kennedy to make up for what happened during the wedding. And what happened to the dress? Years later, Caroline Kennedy, the daughter of Jackie and John F. Kennedy, found this dress crumpled up in a Lord and Taylor box, probably somewhere in the attic, and the family then gave it to the JFK Library and Museum in Boston. And it was last exhibited in 2003. Now the dress is simply too fragile to be exhibited. There is a paper model of it that's also sometimes being exhibited, but the original dress is simply too fragile, like so many other artifacts or designs from fashion history. Why do I tell you this story? Why does it matter? The story matters because Anne Lowe designed for the American elite. At the same time, she was excluded from so many places of her clients. She also created one of the most famous wedding gowns in history, yet her name was almost erased from it. Recently there have been more and more efforts, and I do hope that she will finally get the credit that she actually deserves. She was included in the Met Costume Institute's exhibition Superfine Tailoring Black Style, which was also linked to the Met Gala last year. And also the Winter Tour Museum, Garden and Library in Delaware had a special exhibition about her at the end of 2023 and the beginning of 2024. And her story is more than just fashion. It's about credit, visibility, and who history chooses to remember. So the next time when you see Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress, don't forget this dress was designed by a black woman who shaped American fashion even when the world refused to see her. Now I would like to know from you, did you know about this story behind Jackie Kennedy's famous wedding gown? Or what are your favorite designs by Lowe? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please help me by, on the one hand, liking this video and also by subscribing to my channel if you haven't done so already. If you prefer to read more about fashion, I have tons and tons of articles on my website, thepinklookbook.com, and if you have time, you can also check out my fashion label, Pelagona. And if you enjoyed this video about the story behind Jackie Kennedy's iconic wedding gown, I have another video which may be interesting for you. Thank you very much for watching this video, and see you in the next one.